It's 2 p.m. on Monday, April 21st here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gun-young. It's been 125 hours or more than 5 days since a nearly 7,000-ton Sewol-ho ferry sank into waters with more than 470 people on board. 64 have been confirmed dead so far. Nearly 240 remain unaccounted for. Search and rescue operations have continued for the last 5 days, particularly in high gear overnight, with little results as no survivors have been found since. But down in Jindo, of course, search and rescue operations now in its 6th day continue for the nearly 240 people still missing from the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. But to the dismay of the families of those missing and the entire nation closely watching the operations there with their fingers crossed, the death toll continues to rise and is regretfully expected to go up even more in the coming hours and days. We have two of our correspondents down at the Pyeongmokkang Harbor, just 20 kilometers from the accident site. Our Hwang Sang-hee and Ji Myung-gil joins us live from there. Sang-hee, Myung-gil, do we have any developments on the search and rescue operations there?
Search and rescue operations are ongoing in the hopes of finding survivors in the sunken Sewol-ho ferry. Just about 2 hours ago, rescue teams have begun their attempts at entering the 3rd floor of the vessel, which is the location of the vessel's cafeteria. The divers are also focusing their search on the 4th floor of the vessel, which is where the cabins for the high school students were, and which is where most of these students were believed to be at the time of the accident. More than 200 people are still missing in the sunken ferry, and nearly 90% of those are from the Tanwon High School in Ansan.
That's right. Rescue teams are leaving no options out in the search operations. More than 200 Coast Guard ships and Navy vessels, 13 fishing boats, 35 aircraft, and more than 500 divers are deployed today. Foreign countries are also lending help. Technical experts from the U.S. and Netherlands are at the accident site to lend support to the ongoing rescue operations. Two remotely controlled submersibles are searching inside the sunken ferry with the help of 2 U.S. experts. The Korea Coast Guard has asked Japan to cooperate in sending over officials from the company that manufactured the Sewol-ho vessel. The Coast Guard has also asked China to send 2 barges and 2 cranes. But despite the ongoing rescue operation, there has been no news of any survivors.
That's right. The death toll has risen to 64, with 6 more bodies found today. Some of these bodies have been identified. Others are still undergoing DNA tests, but they are all believed to be female students. The number of survivors, unfortunately, still remains unchanged at 174. The winds are blowing at a speed of 9 meters per second, which is better than yesterday, and the weather looks favorable with clear skies and calm tidal waves at 2-meter level, so hopefully the weather will work in favor of the rescue efforts. Now, 5 full days have passed since the ferry capsized, but the families of the missing are still clinging on to their last bits of hope.
Yes, that's true, Sang-hee, and it's a race against time for the rescue teams, and we just hope to bring you some good news in the coming hours. This has been Ji Myung-gil and Hwang Sang-hee live from Pyeongmokkang Harbor.
Right, in the days that immediately followed the Sewol-ho ferry accident, search and rescue efforts were seriously hindered by fast-moving tidal currents there. But thankfully, conditions are expected to improve this week, which should help divers navigate through treacherous waters near the sunken vessel. Our Park Ji-won takes a look.
Calm waves and clear skies. Wind speeds and wave heights were cut in half on Monday compared to the previous day as a high-pressure front moved into the area. Weather conditions have finally turned favorable for search and rescue crews in waters off Jindo Island, and the clear weather is forecast to continue through this Friday. Strong tidal currents, which significantly hampered the rescue operations last week, have also slowed.
Last week was the time when the current speeds were the fastest, and from the 19th it has been slowing down. Starting this Tuesday, the speeds will be at their slowest.
Last week, the maximum speed of the currents in the area were 2.8 meters per second, or over 10 kilometers per hour. That's expected to drop as low as about 1 meter per second, especially from this Tuesday to Thursday. When tidal currents slow, underwater visibility improves with less floating particles in the sea. That's why experts believe this week will be a turning point in search operations inside the sunken Sewol-ho ferry. 박지원, 아리랑 뉴스.
A recording of the ferry's radio distress call released Sunday shows that there was confusion and indecision by the crew. The families of the victims and the missing are demanding to know why and how the crew was able to escape while the passengers were ordered to stay put in their cabins. ARIRANG News 나현경 has the details.
Even if you speak Korean, it's difficult to make out what the two sides are saying. But what's evident is that the situation sounds quite dire. The joint investigation team composed of the police and the prosecution released the transcript on Sunday. The Sewol-ho ferry and the Chindo Vessel Traffic Service, which is the Marine Traffic Control Center, made contacts 11 times and communicated for 31 minutes. The control center first contacted the sinking ferry at 9:06 a.m. Wednesday. At 9:12 a.m., the ferry was already severely tilted. The crew member who was talking to the control center already knew that the people on board were not able to move. The control center told the ferry that the captain needs to decide whether to order passengers to abandon the vessel. That was around 9:25 a.m., but the ferry said it was unable to make announcements because the speaker system was down. And the last time the two made contact was at 9:37 a.m. when the ferry told the control tower that only the people who were able to escape to the left side of the ferry were able to leave the vessel. Whether the captain was in the steering room when the communications were being made is still unknown. Captain Lee Jun-seok is arrested and formally charged for escaping the ship before the passengers. Further investigation will determine whether the captain in fact did neglect his duty by not promptly notifying the passengers about the situation during that 30-minute time frame. 나현경, 아리랑 뉴스.
So with the release of that radio transcript exchange between the vessel, the Sewol-ho ferry and the VTS, Chindo VTS, a clearer picture has started to emerge about the events at around the time the Sewol-ho ferry capsized. Now, prosecutors are also broadening their investigation into the crew and ferry's operator, and we are also getting word now of more arrest warrants being issued for some of the ferry's crew. We have our Shin Se-min live from the news center. Se-min, what is the latest?
Yes, Kanyang, just a couple of hours ago, the investigators looking into the disaster issued arrest warrants for 4 additional crew members, one of them being an engineer. Now, this is in addition to the captain and 2 other crew who were arrested over the weekend. Officials also say some 20 people related to the renovation of the Sewol-ho ferry have been summoned for questioning. Prosecutors had previously said they would be looking into the mistakes made by the ferry's crew, the botched evacuation attempt, the early rescue efforts, and other related matters, such as the extension of the cabin on the ferry. The Cheonghaejin Shipping Company will also be investigated, including some 20 crewmen and the captain Lee Jun-seok. The prosecutors have banned the family that owns the shipping company from leaving the country, as the investigations may be extended. A special task force also will be organized for an urgent investigation on the cause of the capsizing. The Sewol-ho ferry here was a 20-year-old ship imported from Japan, and according to a report submitted by the Cheonghaejin Shipping Company to the Financial Supervisory Service, the ferry underwent months of renovation to extend its sailing life for more than 7 years. Back to you in the studio.
Right, so, I mean, there are many more questions and answers right now at this point as to what really happened to the Sewol-ho ferry on that fateful day, and investigation continues. Now, Se-min, we are going to come back to you in just a little bit, so stay put. That was our Shin Se-min live from the News Center. Now, with many more clues emerging about what just might have caused the Sewol-ho ferry to sink, the puzzle is slowly coming together. Our Kim Min-ji takes a look on the three knock-on factors that experts suspect caused this ferry to capsize.
Around 8:30 a.m. on Wednesday, April 16th, the Sewol-ho ferry passed through treacherous waters which are notorious here in Korea for their strong currents. 18 minutes later, the ferry veers suddenly, which is being pointed to as the first factor in the sinking. The stern is believed to have turned 80 degrees to the right.
What it means by the vessel supposedly making a P-turn is that the helm was turned to the right, then back again. But the boat didn't come back to its original position. Operations momentarily froze, which results in the ferry making a complete turn.
Due to centrifugal force, the vessel tilts to the left. Now this is when the second factor may have come in. Grips holding down on the ferry's freight may have come loose, causing containers and vehicles in the cargo compartment to lift sharply to one side. The weight concentrated on just one side of the ferry causes it to tilt even further. If the vessel had enough dynamic stability, the vessel could have bounced back to the other side and maintained balance. However, due to renovations to increase the vessel's capacity, the center of gravity on the ship had been raised from its original design.
Due to the expansion of the ship, the upper structure has been changed, making the center of gravity much higher. If the center of gravity and buoyancy are far apart, the dynamic stability decreases.
Experts say the reduced dynamic stability caused the vessel to completely submerge because it wasn't able to recover from the initial tilt. They add that the Sewol-ho ferry may not have had enough ballast water, which maintains the balance of the vessel in order to carry more cargo. As all three factors could have been prevented, experts say the sinking will likely be attributed to human error. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
어서 돌아와 보고 싶어. 사랑해, 얘들아.
The families of the missing are now into a sixth day of waiting for any news of their loved ones who are on board this ill-fated ferry. They have been huddled in an indoor auditorium near the accident site in Chindo, where our Hwang Ji-hye joins us live. Ji-hye, what is the atmosphere there like right now?
It's relatively calm, but families here are bursting into cries as there are bodies being pulled out from the vessel. Now, from time to time, cries of grief are also heard. They're crying out saying, how are we supposed to live? While the families are trying to stay calm, emotions burst out as they check a television screen showing descriptions of what the newly discovered bodies look like. It is extremely heartbreaking, and with no new updates of survivors, hopes are dimming for many families here. Many of them have been here, living here basically since last Wednesday. They look very, very exhausted, many barely able to eat or sleep. Some have even collapsed. Rumors are also spreading among the families here about how rescue operations are going, how the bodies are being handled, and more. It seems like there's very little trust in the authorities. This was Hwang Ji-hye reporting live from the Chindo Auditorium.
Right, the physical and mental health of those families have risen as a concern, and they really need to be looked after. And medical personnel, I believe, are there to stand by near them. Now, identified bodies are then transferred to local hospitals, and Korea University Ansan Hospital is one of them. But the families of the missing are clinging onto the last string of hope that their loved ones will be found alive, but most are also preparing for the worst. ARIRANG News, Kim Ji-yeon is standing by at the hospital. Ji-yeon, how is the atmosphere there?
Kon-young, I'm standing in front of the funeral hall of the Korea University Hospital in the city of Ansan. This city is where most of the passengers, including more than have went to school and lived here. Bodies are sent from the southwestern part of the country to this location where families, friends, and the community is grieving and mourning for the loved ones. The bodies of an additional 21 students have been transported to the city overnight. They were found in the cabin, trapped inside the cabin of the ferry. The body of the vice principal of the Tanwon High School, who is identified by his surname Kang, was released this morning. Mr. Kang committed suicide after feeling this overwhelming guilty at being rescued and being unable to help his students while on the ferry. Some of the bodies of the students are being held at this hospital, but due to parents' requests, they haven't been released yet. But when they are, they'll be transported to a group memorial altar, which will be set up on Wednesday at the Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall for the students and teachers.
Well, Gian, the people directly affected by this are understandably devastated. How are the residents of Ansan coping? Many are still in shock.
Well, Konyang, as you can imagine, it is very difficult. Ansan is located just outskirts of the capital city of Seoul. It's a very vibrant city with more than 780,000 people living here. There's been a hushed silence, though, in the city for the several days now as the whole city mourns for the dead. Most events are canceled or postponed indefinitely. But the community is trying to get back on its feet. The Gyeonggi Provincial Office of Education says it is considering offering commissioned education to students that are receiving treatment in hospitals. The Tanwon High School is closed for the time being, but some of the students may be going to classes as early as Thursday. I'm Kim Jiyeon, live at the city of Ansan.
And President Park Geun-hye has vowed to hold those involved in the ferry sinking strictly responsible, pointing an accusing finger at the crew's irrational and irresponsible actions when the Sewol-ho got into trouble. She also slammed the government's crisis management system, calling for the establishment of a strong control tower in countering and dealing with disasters such as this. Now, for more, let's check back in again with our Shin Se-min at the News Center. Se-min, what did the president have to say exactly?
Yes, President Park Geun-hye, during a meeting with senior secretaries on Monday earlier today, likened the actions of the captain and the crew members of the ferry to mass murder and said it is incomprehensible and unacceptable on legal and ethical grounds. She also said anyone who played a part in the deadly ferry sinking last week should be held accountable according to both criminal and civil law. The president also called on the joint probe team of the prosecution and police to thoroughly and promptly clarify any suspicions the public might have about the ship sinking. President Park also criticized the government's insufficient emergency response at the beginning, saying the control tower should be better oversees cooperation between the site of emergency and related ministries.
Now, Se-min, the site of the accident, Jindo, and the city most touched by this tragedy, Ansan, where Tanwon High School is, of course, have been declared special disaster areas. Now, my understanding is that this means they will have access to special emergency funds, and the government will cover vast majority of the costs. Am I correct?
That's right. The two areas declared as special disaster zones are in Ansan in Gyeonggi-do Province and Jindogun County in the southwestern province of Jeollanam-do. Ansan is where Tanwon High School is located, and many students from the school made up a majority of the passengers on board the ill-fated ferry. And Jindo is where the Sewol-ho ferry capsized last Wednesday, and also where Paengmokang Harbor is located, the closest harbor to the accident site. So these two areas will be able to receive state funds for the search and rescue operations. And local taxes, including acquisition taxes, will also be waived for those in the area. And although the reduction rates of the taxes vary, health insurance and the national pension is to be reduced by 30 to maximum of 50%. So other general taxes will either be reduced or the deadline for payment will be postponed for up to 9 months. And unlike natural disasters or damage from man-made incidents like like the capsizing of the ferry, may differ. So the support will be customized depending on the circumstances of the victims. And also financial assistance will be provided to the victims and the families, including those still waiting for news of their loved ones. Back to you, Ganyang.
All right, thank you, Semin. That was Shin Se-min reporting live from the news center on government measures on the aftermath of this ferry disaster. Now, even those who were not directly involved in the ferry incident could display symptoms of acute stress and anxiety. And that's what's happening to the people of Ansan, with the whole city caught in complete shock, and understandably so, as the second-year students at Ansan's Danwon High School, most of them missing, were on board the Sewol-ho ferry. Our Son Jung-in takes a look.
The entire city of Ansan is deep in sorrow. It has been a heart-wrenching time for everyone, even for those who were not directly affected by the disaster.
I see the same news every day. The media are all covering the story 24 hours a day now, and all of the mothers are crying watching it.
Many have complained of sleep disturbances at night and poor concentration during the day.
All of the residents here are depressed and saddened by the accident. We are also angry, thinking about why this happened in the first place.
The entire city is prone to post-traumatic stress disorder, which often occurs after a person has gone through an overwhelming life experience such as this. Back in 2001, after a terrorist attack in New York on 9/11, some 532,000 people were said to have been suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, which made it hard for them to go through their lives while feeling a sense of normalcy for the next month or more. Even an indirect experience through TV or the internet can have a similar impact and produce stress. It's not only the survivors and the families of the missing who are at risk for PTSD, it's also witnesses and rescue operators. But it's the students and teachers from Danwon High School who are assumed to be suffering the most.
They can suffer from insomnia, nightmares, and flashbacks of past traumatic events. In extreme cases, they can have a hard time adapting to their social life, and in extreme cases, it can even lead to suicide.
Symptoms of PTSD can even show up years after an accident, so it is important to keep an eye on anyone with the condition. Experts recommend that people suffering from PTSD see a doctor if they have distressing dreams or a sensitive reaction to their surroundings. In addition, they advise parents and adults to talk with young children and teenagers about the news and limit their exposure. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
Now, the weather has played a big factor in the search and rescue operations down in Jindo at the accident site. And for more on the weather conditions now, let's go over to our Michelle Park. Michelle, what is the weather looking like?
Well, the weather seems to be cooperating with the search and rescue efforts off the southwestern coast. Now, although it is still a bit windy, the tides are pretty calm. Now, the sky is looking very clear with the visibility up to 14 kilometers, and that will extend even further throughout the day, with the highs of reaching up to 16 degrees. Now, as for the tidal currents, they are slowing in the area, and they'll slow down even further at 6:40 p.m. this evening, giving rescuers an easier time as they search the several vessels. Now, currently, the water temperature in Jindo is at 11.7 degrees Celsius, with the winds blowing at 3.6 meters per second, which is down from the morning, and the height of the waves at 0.6 meters, which is the halfway of what it was yesterday. Well, that's all I have at this moment. Back to you, Ganyang.
Thank you, Michelle, for that. And that's all from me at this hour. Our extensive coverage on the nation's search and rescue efforts for survivors in Korea's ferry disaster continues right here on ARIRANG. Join me again at the top of the hour.